Hello and welcome to the Trading Bell. I'm Nokip Kimball. Now, in the globalized world, we have an opportunity to invest in different markets from the comfort of our houses. And today we are having a conversation about investing in Hong Kong. I'll be talking to Stephen Phillips, who's the Director General of Invest Hong Kong. Stephen, welcome to Trading Bell.
Thank you.
Quite interesting the way the global economy works. That today, from the comfort of my home, I can invest in Hong Kong from Kenya. And also vice versa. Somebody from a different economic system, country, can invest also in the Kenyan economy system. For starters, let's lay the foundation. What is Invest Hong Kong? What is it all about?
Well, Invest Hong Kong is a department of the Hong Kong SAR government, which helps international and indeed mainland Chinese investors to set up in our city to capture growth opportunities. And those opportunities can be in Hong Kong itself, in China, or in wider Asia. And our job is to help companies, and in the context of our discussion today, Kenyan companies identify what Hong Kong might mean for their business.
No, that's quite incredible. So let's talk of opportunities that are in Hong Kong that an investor in Kenya can take advantage of. In what sectors? What is the most vibrant sectors that come top of mind?
Well, I think there are two ways to actually look at Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is both a market in its own right. It's a city of 7.3 million people. It's a modern, advanced economy, sophisticated consumers, demanding businesses. But Hong Kong is also an international hub in Asia. So it also is a route to markets geographically. So I would cut it two ways. So if you look at the sectoral opportunities in Hong Kong, there are three broad areas. Firstly, we're probably most well known as one of the world's top financial centres. We're one of the top three actually in the world. So fantastic opportunities in traditional financial services, in banking, in asset management, in insurance. Fintech, though, is booming just as it is here in Kenya. And actually, it's one of the great opportunities we see for Kenyan fintechs to expand into Hong Kong. So Fintech, a very vibrant ecosystem. We also have a great environment for family offices. So for wealthy investors from around the world to get access to deal flow and to assets in Asia using Hong Kong. So that's one broad sector. Like many other places in the world, we also have a very high focus on innovation and technology. And I'd like to highlight AI and robotics as one really key area. And there's many, many use cases in Hong Kong because of the big financial services industry. There's lots of data, so AI applications, very, very relevant to businesses in Hong Kong. We then have a burgeoning life sciences sector, which really goes all the way from the fundamental research in our world-class universities through commercialization, clinical trials in Hong Kong, and then the scale of the market in mainland China in particular, but also the rest of Asia.
Oh, that's quite incredible. So there are actually very different avenues that you can invest in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And I mean, today you've met quite a number of innovators, especially startups in Kenya.
Yeah.
And you already having a very vibrant startup market. For a Kenyan startup, why should they look at Hong Kong?
Well, it's a good question. You know, startups obviously have their challenges, capital resources, human resources. But startups are really, really good at solving problems. So the very best in the world actually can scale very rapidly. And Hong Kong is such a great environment for Kenyan startups, scale-ups, to be thinking about as a stepping stone to global markets. Perhaps traditionally Kenyan companies have looked more to Europe or to the US, but Asia, I think, is where the future lies, where the big growth will be. So as you say, today we've met with a number of really, really high quality startups. Fintech is one area where clearly Kenya is very strong. Interestingly, I think agtech is another area. Not of direct relevance to Hong Kong itself as a small urban area, but using Hong Kong to sell agtech into wider Asia is a phenomenal opportunity. And you've got some great solutions here in Kenya.
Oh, that's quite incredible. Agriculture tech, which is actually at the center as a country. We're talking about food security in the era of climate change. And also that brings in the issue of climate financing. How vibrant is that?
Great question. Hong Kong has a very deep green finance market. And we're also looking at green tech finance as well. What we have in Asia is a very, very large infrastructure need. So there's very deep markets in green bonds. The Hong Kong SAR government actually has done the first ever tokenized green bond to retail investors, which is pioneering stuff at the global level. So it's a theme that is going through the financial services sector.
No. That's quite encouraging, actually.
It is.
I'm glad you're pioneering that, because one of the aspects you've seen locally, like with the Nairobi International Finance Center, one of the incentives was if you are going through green financing, and I know we're talking about getting investors to Hong Kong, and I want to sort of balance the incentives for people investing in different markets. Green financing was one of the aspects, and sustainable financing at that. In terms of the incentives that lie within the market for investors, what are they in Hong Kong?
Well, specifically for issuers of green bonds, we have a subsidy for the professional fees related to a bond issuance. So that's one of the incentives. But I think the real incentive is the depth of the market and the ability to raise green finance. So it's just the ability to raise the volume that is needed. So I'd encourage Kenyan companies to think about it, and indeed in the longer term think about perhaps the Hong Kong Stock Exchange as a way to raise capital. But I wanted to come back to your point also. What we in Hong Kong believe is that a healthy trade and investment relationship really is a two-way street. Of course, in my day job, I want to see Kenyan investment in Hong Kong. But I also think it's equally important that we see more Hong Kong investors tapping into the opportunities here in Kenya.
Definitely.
Because that's what a healthy relationship is based upon.
Yeah, it's symbiotic,
Exactly.
give and take.
Exactly.
But are there barriers to this give and take that we can do away with sort of to smoothen that kind of back and forth investment within the two sides?
Yeah, I think the main barrier is really lack of knowledge on both parts about respective markets. And that's one of the reasons that we have set up the team for Invest Hong Kong here in Nairobi. It's to give local companies that first-hand local access to the information that they need to make informed business decisions. And similarly in Hong Kong, we really have a high focus on helping Hong Kong companies understand the environment here in Kenya and indeed Africa more generally. So we have a sister organisation called the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, which also has a presence here in Nairobi. So they help on the Hong Kong exporter side and Hong Kong companies looking to invest here in Kenya.
Definitely. And post-COVID recovery for different markets, sort of, it has been different, depending on how buffered these different markets are. For the Hong Kong market, how has been that recovery?
It's varied very significantly by sector. So we've had some sectors that have been hard hit, tourism, retail, but our financial services sector and innovation and technology actually performed very strongly throughout COVID. So the big rebound is really in hospitality and retail, whereas the other sectors are just continuing building upon the growing momentum across Asia, particularly as China has opened up in the last few months. Because obviously, as the second largest economy in the world, it is the biggest engine of growth in the region.
Okay. Speaking about that vulnerability, because you look at developing economies, with what is happening right now in central banks trying to tame inflation all over the place, like for the Kenyan economy, we are seeing a struggle with the greenback, for example, which is we're seeing so much outflows from the market. I don't know, from your perspective, first of all, is it similar in Hong Kong? Or what are you doing to sort of maintain that investor confidence?
Yes, interestingly, Hong Kong isn't facing the inflationary environment that we're seeing in so many other parts of the world. And generally speaking, across Asia, inflation isn't as high as it is in other parts of the world. I think some of that goes to the economic fundamentals of the region, the demographics of the region. So we're somewhat insulated, perhaps, from the pressures that you're seeing here in Europe and elsewhere.
That's quite
But of course,
interesting.
policymakers are acutely aware of the challenges, and inflation obviously is something that can very easily globalize.
Yes, definitely. That's quite interesting. Are there some of the measures that you've seen? Of course, this is something that is continual. It's been in the making. If you want to make to manage inflation, it's a long-term game sometimes. But looking at the way the Asian market has been able to sort of maintain inflation, is it something that as developing markets, low-income countries, we can learn from and implement?
That's a good question. In all honesty, it's probably beyond my competence. So I'll find you another colleague who's more expert to talk to you about that at some point in the future.
Thank you for the honesty. I really appreciate that. But it's very important, as you've said, it's a two-way kind of engagement. We learn from your market, you learn from ours. So for the outlook for the year 2023, talk to me about how this year is going to be investment-wise. And you say, different sectors are booming differently. For somebody who's considering to put their money into the Hong Kong market, what avenues are they looking? What should they be paying attention to?
Yeah, well, I think overall, if I look at sentiment in Hong Kong, if I look at sentiment in Asia, it's actually very, very positive. So really in the last 3-4 months, we've seen sentiment move into positive territory almost universally. And I think that is because all of the regional economies have exited COVID measures. And with the movement of goods and services within the region, I think everybody sees a really very strong rebound. Obviously, people are cognizant of a more challenging global economic situation. If we look at Europe in particular, facing very strong economic headwinds. But I think as a region of the world, Asia probably is more confident than perhaps most other parts.
Definitely.
And that's a good reason for businesses here in Kenya to be taking a good close look at what's happening.
I know, because one of the jitters that we've seen in the international markets, what's been happening in the States with some banks. Everyone is all of a sudden, what exactly is happening with this? But Hong Kong, you're at the center of financial technology. And talk to me about some of these concerns that we're seeing. For example, banks collapse, and I've seen the Fed step in sort of to, normalize the situation so that there's not that much panic. In Hong Kong, how do you handle your financial system so that there are no such situations?
Well, I think what we have in Hong Kong is world-class regulation. And it's one of the reasons that Hong Kong is a top 3 international financial centre. So we have 3 key regulators in financial services, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority on the banking side, but that also performs a function as the de facto central bank, because we're obviously not a country, but a special administrative region. Then we have the Securities and Futures Commission, who regulate the securities markets, very, very important. But we're taking steps actually in digital virtual assets with a new regime being introduced later this year. But again, with guardrails to protect the interests of investors. And then we have the Insurance Authority.
Okay.
But world-class regulation, best practice is absolutely crucial to us as a city. And that goes to the stability of the financial system.
Okay. Let's talk numbers now. How much have we seen Kenyans, invest in Hong Kong, if you have those numbers? And are there targets? Because now I see you in the country trying to mobilize more investment, Kenyans to invest into Hong Kong. Are there targets that you're hoping to hit maybe in the near term?
Good question. The volume of Kenyan investment in Hong Kong is not very large, but we see very large potential. Do we have targets? We do internally. They're not targets that we would put in the public domain.
Yes.
But as an organisation, we have our KPIs. And the fact that we have invested by putting resources on the ground here in Kenya, I think suggests that we think the potential is very real. But it takes time. When people are taking investment decisions, they're not decisions that companies take lightly. So we work with companies over many months, sometimes many years, to help them make those informed decisions. So the fruit of our labours, we might only see in 2 or 3 years down the track.
Okay.
Some might happen much more quickly.
Okay.
Depends on the sector. Fintech could be very fast.
I see. And I'm glad you're having actually a meeting with a lot of fintech players, which is quite vibrant here, equally in Hong Kong. And I'm looking, is this a Kenya thing, or are you doing sort of a rally across Africa?
We have an enhanced focus on Africa, but on this trip, actually, I'm in Kenya and in South Africa. So those are the 2 markets of highest focus to begin with, where we're going into a very proactive mode. Whereas in the wider picture, we're rather more just looking at responding to the demands from potential investors. But each country has its own advantages and own specialisms. For instance, Egypt, if we look at North Africa, a very vibrant startup ecosystem there. So we go into quite a lot of detail in terms of where we think opportunities are, country by country.
Okay.
But in terms of scale and scale of potential, here in South Africa, top of the list at the moment.
Definitely. Beautiful. As we wrap this up, I know from our conversation, do you feel you've convinced, because sometimes you just need that one person to begin, to take that journey and say, I'm going to look at the Hong Kong market and see what they're all about. Do you feel we've been able to convince an investor to look at the Hong Kong market?
Well, I'm really encouraged by many of the conversations that I've had. I think I've met lots of people who are already very well informed, but feel that they need more ammunition to take what is a big decision. But yeah, I'm really optimistic.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Stephen Phillips. I know you have a Chinese name.
I do.
What's the pronunciation again?
Fu Zhongsun.
Fu Zhongsun, which is quite interesting. Is it a direct translation of Stephen Phillips?
No, it was chosen for me specially, actually. So it has, there's 3 characters and they have special meanings.
Okay.
All to do with me as an individual. So one day I'll bore you with the details.
That's beautiful, man. Because next time I'm in Hong Kong, I'll look for somebody to give me also a special name. But
we'll sort that for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Okay.
Stephen Phillips, Director General, Invest Hong Kong, saying that the market is very bullish, as we like to call it. And generally, the Asian market has been like that. And they're saying investors consider Hong Kong, looking at the fintech sector, very vibrant. Yeah, the financial technology sector, very vibrant. They're saying that's an opportunity, but it's not a one-way street. So there is that exchange of value. Also, there is that responsibility of looking at Hong Kong investors. What opportunities lie for you here in the Kenyan market? So that it's quid pro quo, as they call it. But that has been the conversation on matters investing in Hong Kong. Thank you very much for watching the show. I'm Noki Kimoy. I leave you with the markets.